Alafia, bonjour, buenos dias, boa tarde, bonsoir. Ekabo, bienvenue, welcome. My name is Erica Miriam Beverly Ashton, and I am one of the team members of the board of the Black Consciousness Festival. There are six of us, the others being Anderson Gonçalves, Janelle Grant Williams, Nicholas Ward, Sean Samad, and Taika Phillip. It is with our heartfelt appreciation and joy that I welcome you to the opening of the 2025 festival. All of us, one humanity, bound by many. I am reaching in to you from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. We remember the indigenous peoples who first inhabited these lands, among them the Taino, Warao, Kalinago, Lokomo, and so many others. We give thanks for them. We give thanks for their presence, their stewardship of these lands, their knowledge, their ways of doing and being. They are still with us, and for this we are grateful. Today, November 20th, we are standing in solidarity with our relatives in the Federative Republic of Brazil as we commemorate Black Consciousness Day. We remember Zumbi dos Palmares and all of our other ancestors who showed courage, stood up, spoke up, and resisted in so many ways so that we can be here. We give thanks for their wisdom, their actions, their words, their moments of joy, their contributions in building our spaces and clearing pathways for us. We give thanks for all those beings and energies, seen and unseen, who are walking with us on this journey. The ancestors, orishas, spirit guides, animal guides, plant guides, our elders. We also give thanks for those who are coming after us, for whom we are clearing pathways. May we be wise. May we move with joy, courage, and integrity. May we walk gently and truthfully. May we rest well, owning and believing in all that we are. We breathe together, remembering all of us, one humanity, bound by many. And thank you again for joining us. Our opening conversation, which starts the festival this year, will be moderated by Janelle Grant Williams and Nicholas Ward. I now invite Nicholas to lead us in. Nicholas?
Thank you, Erica. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Whichever part of the world and whatever time zone you are joining us from, welcome. My name is Nicholas Ward, and I am a member of the Board of Directors of the Black Consciousness Festival. Welcome to the 2025 edition of the Black Consciousness Festival. The Black Consciousness Festival is a global platform that connects people of African descent by encouraging an exchange of information, traditions, histories, struggles, achievements, and legacies, allowing us to equip each other with the tools and technologies we need to walk in pride, power, and practice. This year, we have much to commemorate. This year marks the 5th anniversary of the Black Consciousness Festival itself. Since our inaugural year, 2020, we have been building an archive, both tangible and intangible, of Black consciousness, which pays homage to those who have come before us and helps clear a path for those who are coming after us. You can find recordings of conversations and cultural exhibitions we have hosted over the years on our website, theblackconsciousnessfestival.com, and on our YouTube channel. It has been a beautiful 5 years filled with the energies of many people across the world, and we thank you for your continued support on this journey. We would like to extend a Feliz Dia da Consciência Negra to our siblings in the Federative Republic of Brazil, the heartbeat of our festival. This holiday coincides with the 330th anniversary of the death of Zumbi dos Palmares, one of the pioneers of resistance to the enslavement of Africans by the Portuguese in colonial Brazil. Viva Zumbi, and Viva Dandara, his wife, a mother, a warrior, and a martyr in her own right. We also acknowledge Emmett Till and his mother, Mamie Till Bradley. This year marks the 70th anniversary of Emmett Till's death at the age of 14 by lynching in the United States during segregation. His murder and the decision of his mother, Mamie Till Bradley, to make his an open casket funeral, exposing the horrors of the racial violence committed against Black people, was a catalyst for the civil rights movement in the United States. Mamie Till Bradley's words are the guiding lights for our festival this year. Quote, 2 months ago, I had a nice apartment in Chicago. I had a good job. I had a son. When something happened to the Negroes in the South, I said, that's their business, not mine. Now I know how wrong I was. The murder of my son has shown me that what happens to any of us anywhere in the world had better be the business of us all. End quote. What happens to any of us anywhere in the world had better be the business of us all. Our theme this year, All of Us, One Humanity Bound by Many, draws inspiration from the words of Mamie Till Bradley and commemorates key anniversaries that have shaped the global struggle for justice and equality. 330 years since the decapitation of Zumbi dos Palmares in Brazil, 70 years since the murder of Emmett Till in the United States, 45 years since the assassination of Walter Rodney in Guyana, and 7 years since the killing of Master Moa Ducatende in Salvador, Brazil. This year, we bring to you 3 film screenings and post-screening conversations, which will be hosted in partnership with the Department of Modern Languages and Linguistics at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. Tomorrow, Friday, November 21st, MOA, Mother Africa Roots, explores African spirituality, ancestral memory, and decolonial identity within the Brazilian context. On Saturday, November 22nd, Till follows Mamie Till Bradley's legacy in the United States. And on Sunday, November 23rd, Walter Rodney, What They Don't Want You to Know, features radical education, Pan-Africanism, and intellectual resistance in the Caribbean. As you watch these films and listen to these conversations, we encourage you to be kind to yourself. Pause, breathe consciously, move, and appreciate all that you are. Thank you for joining us and enjoy. To start, we bring to you today a conversation entitled With Mamie Till Bradley's Words, What Happens to Any of Us, which will explore the contemporary meanings of Black consciousness across the diaspora and seek to emphasize the power of solidarity across the diaspora. This conversation will be led by 2 of the members of the Black Consciousness Festival, Nicholas Ward, myself, and Janelle Williams. Please allow us to introduce our fellow conversationalists. Anderson Henrique Gonçalves is from Cachoeira, Reconcavo, do Bahia, Brazil. Anderson is a capoeira learner. He has a strong passion for literature, trained in global and international studies, and he is currently pursuing a PhD in history. Fiona Compton is a Saint Lucian filmmaker, photographer, and historian, and the founder of Know Your Caribbean, a platform dedicated to celebrating and educating audiences about Caribbean history, culture, and identity. Through vibrant storytelling, visual art, and community engagement, Fiona works to challenge misconceptions about the region and make its rich heritage accessible to all. Her work bridges past and present, empowering Caribbean people and the diaspora to connect deeply with their roots while fostering pride, knowledge, and cultural preservation. Kirt Henry, PhD, is a Jamaican-born thinker, curator, researcher, writer, and advocate for the research, documentation, and preservation of African Jamaican culture. He is the director of the African Caribbean Institute of Jamaica and Jamaica Memory Bank. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in History and Heritage Studies and a Doctor of Philosophy in Cultural Studies from the University of the West Indies, Mona. He has served as an adjunct lecturer at Institute of Caribbean Studies, the UE, Mona, where he taught courses on African religious retentions, Caribbean fashion, and material culture studies. As a cultural scholar, he uses his platforms to create an environment which promotes appreciation, respect, and tolerance for gender, historical, political, religious, and cultural differences amongst his audiences, as this, he believes, is the foundation of community and nation building. Welcome, everyone, and thank you. Hi, Fiona. Hi, Kirt. How are you?
Very well. Thank you all for having me. Very
Thank you for
excited.
being here. Okay, so to start our conversation today, I would like to pose a question to the both of you. The
Mhm.
term Black consciousness has evolved across time and geography. In 2025, across the diaspora, what does Black consciousness mean to you personally and in your work?
Okay. If Kurt, you'd like to go first, or should I?
Go ahead.
um, I mean, I think that's a question we can talk about that for a very long time. I think we definitely at a really amazing time right now. I think like especially like in the Caribbean, seeing like this wave of consciousness that is happening, and I think social media has been such a powerful tool. Um, but I was talking to somebody, and it's just like the like we're talking about how like the like social media has created this consciousness, right? And speaking to a friend of mine from Guadeloupe who works in the culture in Guadeloupe. He's a traditional masquerade drummer and stuff, and we're talking about um history, because he said he started to hate history. And I said to him, I said, well, I fell in love with history because, and how do you put history in a contemporary context, right? And I said, I love history because history is the foundation of culture. Culture is the foundation of identity. Identity is the foundation of self-confidence, and self-confidence is the foundation of success. So when we're looking at things about Black consciousness, right? All of those things are the tiers in terms of creating a consciousness and creating that level of self-awareness that is going to transform our societies. And so to me, that is what Black consciousness is. So this is why I love the work like what the festival is doing, because people sometimes say, okay, you're only focusing on history and things on the past, but it's developing that foundation of self-awareness and like Caribbean identity and Black identity in order to bring ourselves out of the previous colonial spaces and subjugation that we have been placed under. So that's how I could condense it.
Oh, it's my time. So I agree with all that you have said, Fiona. For me personally, Black consciousness is many things. But I will begin by saying Black consciousness for me and in my work is a sort of spiritual awakening. For me, that is where it begins. That grounding, that spiritual anchor that gives you a sense of who you are as a person, and who we are as a community. And if you're not rooted in a sort of African mindset, and if you don't feel as if you are belong to an African origin, then the idea of Black consciousness begins to distort, because you have to begin to connect yourself to the motherland, so to speak, in order to get that sort of ancestral awakening that you will need to carry you through whatever movement you are a part of, or whatever project you are a part of. And Black consciousness for me also has to do with a sort of psychological reconditioning of the mind. Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley talked a lot about mental slavery, rising from mental slavery. And I think as Black people, we need that sort of consciousness raising when we talk about Black consciousness. To be Black isn't only about the aesthetics. You know, you wear the dashiki, you wear the fabric and so on. But it has to do with that sort of deep embedded consciousness, that firm knowledge of who you are beyond the physicality of it. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. So from both of you, I hear sentiments around identity and community. And, our theme this year is inspired by Mamie Till Bradley's words. And she reminds us that what happens to one of us anywhere must concern all of us. Okay. And that alludes to this sense of community that African people have by ancestry. But I would like to ask you, what do you believe is the most urgent bridge, so to speak, that we need to strengthen today across the diaspora? Like, in what ways do you think we can build community more efficiently? Where are we lacking in that context? I know this one is a loaded one.
Yeah, it's a big question, and I think for one, it's like taking down a lot of like imperialist, like colonial mindsets that we've inherited. So for example, like in terms of like kind of removing, for example, like the Anglo-centric lens of the Caribbean, right? Or us who are in the English-speaking Caribbean. I mean, I know y'all have like y'all like having all these conversations with Brazil. I know for y'all, language is not a thing for y'all, but for the rest of the English-speaking Caribbean, there is like a complete blockade. So I'm sitting in Saint Lucia right now. I can see Martinique right now. And there's some days I can see people's house. I can see the cars, right? But the average Saint Lucian does not know all of what's going on in Martinique because they are French speaking. We just go there to shop and, they have euros and they have nice European things or whatever. But we'd have no idea about the politics, the oppressive things that France is doing to them today in terms of how they use, even just how they use things like the drum and the conch shell as forms of resistance. Now, we know these things come from our history, right? But when I look at things from a St. Lucian standpoint, we only use the drum as entertainment. We blow the conch shell for kicks off and fun and whatever in a cultural event, but we don't. You'd find people in Martinique in front of the courthouse drumming and blowing the conch shell as means of resistance. Now, this country is only a few miles away, and we don't have that communication. So I think the first thing, to answer your question, Nicholas, is that we need to remove a lot of these kinds of like insular lenses that we have in and a very like nationalistic as well. Because you find often when you look at things within social media and these conversations, oh, my island have this, or my country have the best this, and it's very it's very counterproductive, and it just continues to create that divide. But all of those things come from like imperialistic colonial lenses, that mine is better than yours and I have no interest because you don't speak my language and that kind of thing like that. And understanding that we are very, very much interconnected. And I think that's the first thing that we need to do, is to take that lens off first. Over to you, Kirt.
For me, I think what could create that bridge is for Black boys and girls, and I use that term strategically because for me that's where it begins. For us to be more historically and culturally aware. I don't think that we know a lot about who we are. I don't think that we know a lot about ourselves. And one of my criticisms of the curriculum in the right across the Caribbean region is that history is being taught with the lesson that our history and origin and our identity began on the plantation. I think we need to be more strategic in taking back our history and beginning the conversations from the continent. We did not come to the Caribbean as slaves. We were enslaved. And so terminology is important. We came as kings, we came as queens, we came as doctors, lawyers, engineers, and so on. So we need to foster that kind of knowledge awareness, knowledge consciousness, knowledge appreciation for who we are as a people. And a lot of our forefathers, a lot of our Black leaders, Black nationalists, stress that point, that we need to educate ourselves, you see, in order to challenge the systems that we are up against. So that for me is the bridge, and that bridge is the sort of historical consciousness and awareness across the diaspora.
Yeah, just to add to that, I agree. I mean, looking at like our curriculum, as usual, and even just the revisionist language that we have to use as well, right? Like when you said not slaves but enslaved, and changing that language, I think is super important. And they talk, oh, the Caribs and Arawaks, and even like the indigenous people don't even refer to themselves as Caribs, it's Kalinago. And then they came and then they just died from disease, and then they had slavery, and then the Europeans gave us emancipation, hooray, and then independence, that's it, right? And then, as you said, there is no context about in terms of how we existed before that. And then even like within our culture, right? Because me, I've grown to just have a love for like, okay, what's dance is that? What's that? That's Kumina. Okay, where's that? Okay. And then asking those questions, right? And then showing, oh well, that comes from the Congo. This is an Igbo thing from Nigeria. This thing is from Ghana. This thing is from Burkina Faso, whatever. And then okay, so we actually these pre-existing things transported themselves and survived all of those years of it being called demonic, it being made illegal, it being seen as lesser, and then now we just say, oh, that's just that's an African drum. Not that this is a Congolese thing, this is a Ghanaian thing. And I think that kind of blanketing of our culture also separates us from having that knowledge of, no, like we come from different tribes, and how did we get there? And we brought a lot of beautiful things. And I think our curriculum is painfully underrepresenting those things, because I dropped history in Form 3 like a rock. I had no interest in it. It was just a bunch of dates. I felt like our history was not humanized. I was just being told these facts, and it wasn't contextualized into my story, into my society story, why we do these things. Like, do you know that Obia comes from this word, which is a West African word? It's not just a word we just said, and those are the things I think that for sure our curriculum does not tell the fullness of our story. It comes from a very colonial, almost as if like the Caribbean just came into existence like when Europeans reached. And giving that full context really does fragment our identity and has a lot of missing pieces. So definitely I agree with what you're saying, Kirt.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you both for sharing. I agree with you. I think both of you, Fiona and Kurt, you mentioned language, and in different ways that are equally, impactful to us and our communities, whether it be the fact that parts of the diaspora speak English and other parts speak French, and because of that, there is this divide, and even internal competition that we see in the Caribbean, and the Spanish-speaking Caribbean is better than the English-speaking Caribbean or whatever, and those kinds of conversations being held. And as well as in academia, even on my own journey of Black consciousness, I remember in university being confronted with the word slave having to be replaced with enslaved, and tribe having to be replaced with ethnic group and things like that. We don't realize how much these things infiltrate our psyches and influence our own sense of self and the way that we perceive ourselves as Black people in the world and perceive other Black people and how we engage in our own communities. So I appreciate and I agree with both of you on that.
May I just add something?
Yes, of course.
Both of you spoke to the issue of there's this competition in the Caribbean, and that was by design. That was a part of the colonial design, But it's so interesting that even the Black Lives Matter project that was happening, or movement that was happening in the US, I've heard some Caribbean people saying that, oh, we don't business with that. That's their thing. But it's interesting because once Caribbean nationals go to the US, you're no longer Jamaican, you're no longer Trinidadian, you are known as a Black immigrant. All of us, regardless of our background, regardless of where we are from, all of us fall under one umbrella. So it is quite important for us to begin to come together in a unified way and understand that we are all challenging in more than one ways a colonial system that has been designed to oppress and suppress Black expressions and so on. So we really need to come to that kind of consciousness and to understand that we are all in this fight together, and for us to have patience with each other. Last night, I did some calculations, and slavery ended in Jamaica in 1834, just 191 years ago, not a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time. And we are all on this healing journey. That's another area that I want to allow us to think about more. Just be patient with each other, be compassionate with each other, because we're all healing in more than one ways. So that's just my contribution.
I will quickly add to that. I think it's very interesting the conversations that are being had, because in terms of looking at how Caribbean people, when we move to America and we find ourselves different to African Americans, right? And I've had some conversations with African American people say, why are Caribbean people don't like us? Like, y'all just, and I'm like, it's not that. And like, of course, I get defensive and stuff. It's like, no, it's not that. But then I have to think about conversations and even things that I have said in my own ignorance and had conversations with friends and family and certain things we would say about African Americans. And that is because that is the narrative that we have been presented on TV. We have had, us too have been very underinformed about how they have been intentionally impoverished, the red zoning through like the Black communities, all the things that the constant things that they have done. And we have this concept that they all on welfare, and then there's just gangsters and whatever. So when we go to the US, we're like, well, we're not like y'all, eh? Oh, we are upstanding, we speak good English, we speak the Queen's English, and we have good education, and that in itself is a very colonial mindset. I could go into the FBAs and the ADOS and how they see Caribbean people, but that again is another example of a design of separation and people being underinformed about the Caribbean's relationship with the African American journey as well. But that I will talk on that for I'll take up the whole conversation on that, so I'll pause.
Okay. It's interesting that this is where we have reached in the conversation, and I can introduce my fellow board member, Janelle, who just joined us, who is also Trinidadian American, and would have had this experience of, I'm pretty sure, navigating being Trinidadian and experiencing life as an American as well, and interacting, with Americans in that space as a Caribbean person, having those two identities mingle, and how has that been?
Absolutely. And hello, everyone. A special hello to our guest panelists. I'm so excited to be here to just share this space with you. This really is a sacred space and a conversation that needs to be had. And I'll say that I'm going to bring a slightly different perspective. I think it's an honor to represent two pieces of my identity. To hail from Trinidad, for me, doesn't necessarily mean being born in a hospital in Trinidad. What it means is that everything about me, whether it's food, culture, dialect, perspective, comes from my family, my grandparents, parents, grandparents, and ancestors who hail from Trinidad. And so that's what I represent. And that's what my children who are born on this American soil, that's what they represent as well. And I recognize, appreciate, and identify with the Black American journey here. Because in this space, that's what people see and that's how they treat me, right? Obviously, when I'm in the company of other Black Americans, they can hear something different. They see something different, whether it's the style, the swag, right? And perspective and all of that. But it's lovely because when we get together, we gel well, right? And I have heard some of what you've mentioned, and some of the colonial perspective of folks who may have been actually born in a hospital on a Caribbean island, right? But I think as time has gone on, we're getting a little less of that, because we're seeing how similar we are, right? When you travel to, let's say, to the south of the country, and you're finding that, the grandparents of the south are just like the grandparents from Princestown, or the grandparents from, right? And so I think our differences are dulling, and our uniqueness and our similarities are being amplified and appreciated. And a lot of that is coming through our food, the music, the rhythms that we all enjoy. And so I think that's beautiful that we are evolving as people. And because these conversations are happening as well, is contributing to that beauty in that evolution.
Yeah, thank you for that, Janelle. So we talked a bit about community building, and I want to push the conversation a bit back towards the individual for a second, especially now that Anderson, our board member from the Federative Republic of Brazil, has joined us. So recently we have been seeing some things. Oh, hi, Anderson. But yeah, recently we've seen some things happening around the world in the news. Fiona, you talked briefly earlier about Martinique, and I would like you to expand on that further in the conversation. I know that you were there recently with some of our brothers and sisters who were being harassed for decorating statues in Martinique. And we know that in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro recently, there has been some extreme amount of police brutality against Black people. We know what's happening where you are, Janelle, in the United States right now with the Trump administration, and Kirt with the Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica, and conversations around climate justice. I would like to know, okay, we all share a global history. Each region of the African diaspora faces its own battles, yeah? But what is one local struggle in your community that you believe deserves more global attention?
Hmm. There's so many.
Mm.
Hmm.
I
My
mean, I
word.
mean,
Hmm.
it's, I think all of us would probably have like 20 different ones, and it's like, how do you place more importance of one over the other? But I think, well, for me, I think in, because I'm like very heavily involved in it, the conversation of reparations and seeing, so for example, Barbados is really working, because they have like the clearest timeline, right? From 1625 to 2022 or 23, when they went into republichood, is they have had this relationship with Britain. So their records go back. It's just, there's no, they had sometime French, sometimes Spanish, no, British, right? And what they are doing right now is really investing into their heritage for the conversation of reparations. And I think the more that we go into it and creating that clearest timeline, I think that's something that we should need to galvanize more as like a Caribbean community, when speaking about the topic of reparations, this is not some theoretical thing. It is a tangible thing that is already happening. We're having all of these institutions apologizing and giving this money and then not having conversations with people in the Caribbean, right? Or not having conversations with the people that it's supposed to be for. And I feel very uncomfortable with this, that people are making decisions for us and the community is not fully aware. It's like, oh, well, Lloyd's gave 65 million. Okay, where that money reach? Who? I didn't see Lloyd's that had the same plantation that so and so, that whatever. Like, these conversations, we're not involved. We're not involved in those conversations. I can talk about money another time, but I think that for me, because since the first instance of reparations I remember coming across was the University of Glasgow in 2019, right? So it's now 6 years later. The Church of England has pledged. They said 100 million. Now they want to make it to be 1 billion. Where are we in this conversation? Like I said, Lloyd, 65 million. The Gladstone family, one of the biggest enslavers in British history, that enslaved more than 2,000 people in Guyana and received millions in compensation. They gave £100,000 to the University of Guyana. And these are things that are not common knowledge across the region. I think there's something, it's already happening. Reparations, people say it's not going to happen. It is. And how do we engage in it? Because I feel like all these people are saying sorry and throwing money. And then, we don't need to talk about slavery anymore because we gave you all your money. And then like, oh, I didn't know. So I think that's something that definitely we should be more engaged with. And not just academics, like people on the street, it should be common knowledge.
And then
Yeah.
even
Can I
the
jump in?
formula, and then to some extent the formula for how was the calculation done, right?
Yes.
And the reparation doesn't mean that you buy silence. So I've given you this money because I owed it to you, and so don't say anything more about it.
Yes, I'll give them
That's it.
absolution.
Right. Right.
Um,
Mhm.
is it my time? Yes.
Take the
The
floor.
floor
Take
is
the
yours.
floor.
All right. So for me, I have 2 points that I want to discuss. One is I want to piggyback on the conversation of reparations. That's one. And two, the other point I want to talk about is the decriminalization of African traditional religions in the Caribbean. Right? So reparations is an ongoing conversation. It's a global conversation. And one of the things that we need to emphasize as well, so the monetary aspect of reparations, that's one thing. But then you have areas such as, or forms of reparations, such as knowledge reparations, where we need to take more seriously the idea of decolonizing our curriculum, as we mentioned earlier, and also our libraries or museums or archives. A lot of these institutions are still under kind of colonial framework. They are still operating as such, And I think we need to take a serious look into that in terms of whatever monies that we're getting be fueled into the reframing of these institutions, because they have long-lasting effect. Getting money is one thing, but also empowering the people within the Caribbean to begin to see themselves beyond the framework of being a slave, that is important. And the other point I want to talk about is the decriminalization of African traditional religions. Right across the region, for example, in Jamaica, we are having a conversation now, a national debate about repealing the Obia Act, 1898 colonial act that was placed on the books because back then the plantation masters thought that African spirituality was the life force of all the rebellions that were taking place. And this Obia Act was implemented after the 1760 Taki rebellion, when Taki basically beat the colonial masters, and they say, oh, so we need to put laws in place to silence, and to further police black consciousness and black rebellion and so on. So there are these outdated colonial laws that we still have on the books in the Caribbean. There are laws that still seek to police and regulate how we speak, how we dress, how we move about. There are several laws across the Caribbean. You have the Vagrancy Act. You have the Noise Abatement Act. You have the Act Against African Traditional Religion. So these are some steps that we need to take, to move away from these colonial frameworks. And one of the propaganda that is still being repeated in the Caribbean is the idea that Haiti is the way it is today because of voodoo. That is a myth that we really need to challenge, because it's a lie. And one of the designs of colonialism is to spread propaganda about Black realities. One, we are barbaric, we are uncivilized, we do not have a culture, our spirituality is backward, and we still are struggling with who we are as a people when it comes on to our traditional religions. So I will rest there for now. So those 2 points I would like to highlight.
Thank you, Kirt. And Anderson, what about you?
First, I'd like to apologize for my delay. It's the 20th November, so I think that as we gather today to honor the memory of leaders such Zumbi, Dandara, Apautuni, Mulanguinho, Teresa de Benguela, and also contemporary Moron leaders in Brazil, I think it is important to highlight that just today, our president named someone for the Supreme Court that is completely at odds with the expectations of organized civil society, of the Black population. It's the 20th November, and yet he appointed a conservative white man to a court that has never had a Black woman. As for your question on struggles within our community in Brazil that deserve global attention, I believe that there are 2 struggles that are intertwined and cannot be separated. One is land distribution that is tied to reparations as well. And the other one is the genocide of the youth, of the Black youth in Brazil. And I strongly believe that this is intertwined because if we look at the figures and at the cases, Maroon leaders, young or elders that are tied or at the forefront of the struggle for land distribution are those that are killed the most. And since the 2016 coup d'etat in Brazil that contributed to the election of Jair Bolsonaro, the cases of Maroon leaders and women are deeply implicated in Maroon struggles in Brazil all over the country, are those who die. And the numbers have multiplied threefold, fourfold since 2016. And I think that land distribution is also tied to having the possibility of practicing African religion in Brazil, because this is also a topic that is serious at the moment. The persecution of Candomblé temples in Brazil is a really serious problem. And I think that they're all tied together to the fact that Brazil has, for a long, long time, concentrated land within the hands of a few. And if it continues to distribute land in the same pace that it's been doing until now, it'll take us more than 2,000 years. And it is not me who's saying, it's the National Coordination of Black Rural Communities, Black Rural Maroon Communities. They have been publishing reports at least as of 2023, because of the sort of violation that Quilombos have been experiencing since then. The National Coordination started publishing reports to call attention from civil society. So they emphasize the need to distribute land, and the need to protect Maroon leaders, most of whom are women. Um, yeah, I think that this is a struggle that really deserves attention in Brazil. Um, those territories, Maroon territories, are also targeted by police brutality, as you can notice in August 2023. Mãe Bernadette Pacífico, a priestess from Salvador, she was located at the metropolitan region of the capital, but she's actually her Maroon territory is located in a city called Simões Filho. They've been dealing with a long-dated conflict with some landowners and some landowners involved with higher ranks of the state government. And a 72-year-old has been killed with more than 12 shots in her face and her breast in front of her grandchildren, the 17th August 2023. So the struggle for land distribution is really tied to prevent the Black genocide in Brazil, which you recently saw on the news. More than 120 people were killed in Rio. Rio was the most noticeable case because of the large amount of people killed. But if we look at the figures in Bahia, they are just as gut-wrenching. Just these past 2 weeks, more than 12 Black men ages 17 to 29 have been killed in my region by police. So this is in Bahia, the levels of violence in Bahia targeting the Black population are really problematic at the moment, both in the capital and also in the so-called hinterland, which is where I come from. I don't come from the capital of Bahia. I come from a city called Cachoeira in a region called Recôncavo. And originally I grew up in the countryside. So the issue of land distribution really speaks to my heart and to the expectations of my area, people who live in my area.
Mm. Mm.
Okay. I want to say thank you all for sharing those struggles on behalf of your communities. You all mentioned reparations in some form, whether monetary or land distribution, or even could with respect to freedom, justice for people that practice African traditional religions, things that we value here at the Black Consciousness Festival. In 2021, we had an entire week of conversations around reparations. And these are issues that I think the entire diaspora, the entire Black diaspora can relate to. And, you know, goes back to the whole point of having this conversation of one humanity bound by many. We are all experiencing the same thing in some different way, if not the same way. With that being said, I would like to pose another question. In imagining the next 5, 25, or even 50 years of Black consciousness work, what is a transformation you hope to see across the diaspora?
One of the things that I would like to see that I was actually thinking of when Anderson was speaking is, and this might not seem significant, but I think it is that as we travel the world and as we visit one another, you know, sometimes we're just going on a vacation, a quote unquote vacation, right? We want to sit in the resort and put our feet up and rock back. But I think it's important that when we travel, that we keep our eyes open and we carry the Black consciousness lens with us everywhere we go, right? And so, for example, to visit Brazil and to not have that lens, I think is an injustice. right? So I want to know when I go into this space, really understand where I'm visiting and what life is like for the people of African descent in that space. Because I think it's easy for us to visit and for some to really, frankly, be oblivious to it, right? And we can go in and we can enjoy the resort and we can enjoy the space and we can, do a few tours, right? And see some monuments or whatever, whatever the sightseeing thing to do in those spaces. But I think again, as we travel, as we move around, that we understand the condition of the day, and just hold that perspective, use that lens, share information, and carry that responsibility wherever we go.
I think am I being heard?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Can you see me clearly?
clear.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can.
All right. I think like yourself, I think my point is stemming from Anderson's contribution, listening to the realities of what's happening. And the question that comes to my mind is how much of these stories are being filtered in the Caribbean? So my word is intentionality. We are so bogged down with what is happening in the US. Every time I go on social media, it's stories about Donald Trump and so on. But and I guess we have to be intentional in going and seeking the stories of our Caribbean neighbors, seeking the stories of our Black brothers and sisters. And that is my hope for the Black diaspora, is for us to be more intentional of becoming aware of what is happening with our brothers and sisters across the diaspora. Policies are being generated every day that will affect us, and these are policies that has to do with race and ethnicity, and freedoms and so on. So we have to be more intentional about knowing, whatever is happening, whether it is in Brazil, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Barbados, and so on. We are so, we have become infiltrated, and that too is by design. So the more distracted you are with Western media, it takes away from our own agenda. It takes away from what we are trying to achieve as a people. So we have to be more strategic where information sharing is concerned. Harriet Tubman, she formed a channel for herself. She established a route for herself. So my question for us in the diaspora is, what are the routes and channels that we are creating for ourselves, for our own people? And I think we have to be, again, intentional about that.
And I think this is one of the ways as well, right? This festival and looking at our theme of all of us, right? And I'm so grateful for this opportunity because I don't know that just ordinarily I would have a conversation with Anderson, right? Well, I could call Anderson at any time, but I mean, someone like Anderson, right? Someone who's in that space, who has this information that I may not be exposed to in my daily living, right? And so by creating this, right, this is community that we have intentionally created. It wasn't just, okay, let's invite a few people. No, it took time, right, to and then we do this every year. It takes time to just set a date, to contact folks, to reach out to folks that you may have never spoken to before, to reach out to someone that you may have never met and you're only seeing them on Instagram. I feel like I'm with a celebrity Fiona right now, right? I follow her page and she is blessing my life on a regular basis when I read her posts, right? But here I am sitting in conversation with her. So that means a lot. And so this is a model of a way that we can come together and share information and be aware of what our brother and our sister is experiencing in a land that maybe we may never visit, right? I visited Brazil for the first time this year. I don't know when I will go again, although I do want to go soon. But nevertheless, being a part of this community is what pushed me in that direction sooner rather than later.
I mean, I would just like to add that like my journey through history has really allowed me to meet amazing people like y'all, and to see that we are all on the same mission, but we're just doing it in different ways. And it's almost as if like once you step into that space, you're just going to meet more and more like-minded people, more and more, and to have like these amazing conversations. And yes, it's very frustrating that I always had to remind myself, Fiona, the USA is only 4% of the world. That means
Oh, yes.
96% of the world is not America, right? And so why do I know more about Trump and his politics than I know more than I know about Brazil, whose history aligns way much more with my history? You know, why do I know less? And you know, it's just I think that's the thing. And so I'm really enjoying seeing that, you know Your Caribbean started because I was frustrated because I'm like, I'm not finding the stories, and it is just a journey of me teaching myself. So things people see me sharing, a lot of times I just found out myself. So it's my own learning journey. I'm not no professional. Um, but it's and then like the sharing, like somebody from Curacao will say, hey, do you know we have this dance called taboo? And then I'll say, yo, but they have that in Jamaica and it looks the same. And they're like, yo, how does Jamaica and Curacao have the same thing? And it's the same dance, it looks the same way. And then it leads to a whole bunch of other questions. And these are the things that really have been filling me up and I've been really thankful for. And I'm just seeing more and more of these spaces that is becoming less and less of a rarity, to have these real conversations, and also speaking with nuance as well. I think, the development of Black consciousness, when we look at, the Harlem Renaissance, when we look at W.E.B. Du Bois and all of those people and the Harriet Tubmans and all the many, and then looking at all the nuances that we're speaking about now is really just inspiring to see just how much there is. There's no lack. There's no lack anymore that we used to have. And I think I'm very thankful that we are also learning in different ways. If you don't like reading, no problem. There will be a TikTok to show you. Did you know this happened in Brazil? This, and like, wow, I didn't know that in 90 seconds. And these are the things that I'm really grateful for right now.
Can I jump in?
Yes, of course.
So I second everything that has been said previously, but I'd like to add that if you don't like reading, go meet someone and see how they're building community on the ground. Since at least 2020, yes, I've been moving to different places, and in all of those places, I tried to see how Black people on the ground were building community. And I think that I've been learning a lot from these people. Here where I live now, I'm now living in Brazil at the moment. I've been meeting with people that build community in a very beautiful way. And I think it's really beautiful what they do at Brooklyn. As for Bahia, I think that I've been learning a lot from elders, especially elders that are involved in communitarian struggles for decades now. In the last year, I continue to work actually with the Quilombola Council. It's a Maroon council that gathers 18 communities in the Iguape Basin and Valley. It's the region of Bahia that concentrates the largest amount of Moron communities. At least 18 communities take part in that council, and they meet on a monthly basis. At least elders, children, youth attend, and it's just seeing that what can happen when people actually meet and think carefully about what, not only about what separates them, but what about brings them together and devise a collective agenda that's been going on for some decades now. I think it's really beautiful, and I think that what I'd like to see across the diaspora is the elaboration of more communities, even if we are located in different geographies. I think we do have a lot in common, and I think that we should meet more, not only virtually, and devise collective long-term strategies together.
Mm. I love that. I was in Colombia most recently, and to keep my comment as short as possible, I was a part of a group, and there were only two of us who looked like me in the group. And we met with a coffee farmer. And, you know, of course, his focus was his coffee, his crop, and that sort of thing. But then at one point, he said something that I thought was so heartwarming. He said, "You're here for my coffee, but I want you to understand, what is Colombia?" And then he went into talking about the people of Colombia and their African descent. And he said, "Don't think that because of how I look, that this is Colombia." He said, "No, I need to give you something more." And he brought out food, and he brought out instruments and started to play the instruments. And other individuals started to play the instruments. And then at one point he stopped, he said, "This is Colombia." Right? And so it was a magical moment, because up until that point, you know, I was having all these thoughts in my head, right? But I hadn't really said anything. And then later on, he came to me and he said, "I did that because you are here. I was so happy to see that you were here. I would have done it even if you weren't here, but I thought it was even more important to do because you were here." Right. And so it was like that instant connection that we feel, you know, when you say, "Oh, I see my people." So I like what you were saying, Anderson, because it basically means no matter where we go, we can find one another. Right. And so whether it's virtually or in person, we can, yeah, we could find one another.
If I can just add to that, I mean,
Mhm.
reflecting on where we're coming from as a people, there were laws in place to prevent
Mm,
us from building communities. So the fact
mm,
that we can do this today, I think we have an opportunity to carry on the voices and the dreams and aspirations of our ancestors.
mhm,
Um, and this is important, you know, and I think also we have been given spaces to empower others. So I'm all about empowering community. You were given this opportunity, you were given this capacity, you were given this position to work on behalf of your community, and it's important for us to always build connections. You know, in my capacity as the director of the African Institute in Jamaica, I can now call on Anderson and say, "Anderson, I have this project. Let's work together to build bridges between Jamaica and Brazil and Jamaica and Trinidad and so on." And it's important for us to have these sort of conversations, to create these sort of platforms, because believe it or not, we are the voice of those who are voiceless. There are a lot of people who
mm.
want to say these things, but they can't because they don't have the space and they don't have the sort of community that we are trying to build here. So after this program, you can check your social media. I'll be sending you follow requests. I'll be connecting and to contribute
Yes.
beyond.
Thank you all for sharing. It's interesting that the transformation that we all hope to see is community. I'm not sure what I was expecting your responses to be, but that one certainly surprised me. And when I think about it, sometimes on this journey of Black consciousness, we can experience a lot of loneliness. Sometimes you're surrounded by Black people that are not Black people, so to speak, that haven't fully, as Bob Marley said, emancipated themselves from mental slavery. And so you feel like an outcast, you feel as though you're crazy sometimes, but having people around you that share the same sentiments and the same values, the same goals in life as you is important. And this work is important because we are doing this work not just for us and the people like us, but for the entire community, the entire world, as a matter of a fact. Yeah, thank you for that. And on that note, it's almost time for us to say goodbye, but I would like to ask everyone, what is one message you would like the people tuning in around the world to carry with them after this conversation?
Can I?
Yes, you can start, Anderson.
I'd like to quote a friend of mine that some of you know, Veluma. We were talking 2 days ago, and I was sharing that I had looked for community over here. I live in New York at the moment, and although there were some Black people in the community that I was sort of being part, it felt really weird to be there. And then I decided to look for other places, and I landed at a very beautiful place at the moment. And she told me, this is the problem of staying too long where you do not belong. You you make the encounter the beautiful you postpone the beautiful encounters. I think that the message that comes across is that no matter the sort of difficulties or obstacles that we find on our way to build community, we have to insist and we have to keep going. So this is a message that I would like to pass across, that we gotta insist. And we gotta insist because we have to pursue our own mission. We all have a mission. So we gotta pursue the mission that we were bestowed upon us.
I think for me, Anderson, while we persist, I want to remind us that we should remember to be patient with ourselves. We are trying to undo 300 years of enslavement, 300 years of trauma. And while we are on the mission and we're going, just remember to be kind to yourself. You know, we have been through a lot as a people, and as you go forward, um, um, be intentional about healing and also healing those within your community. You know, so be kind to yourself and while you go on this healing journey.
I would add, and I agree with everything you all are saying, and Kurt, especially because you've spoken about kindness before in this conversation, and that I think that's a new concept for all of us, to be kind to ourselves. You all know the culture of, keep your head down, work hard, having this humility, like work yourself to death. That's what validates you. And but I think for me, what I would encourage everyone is to stay curious about ourselves, stay curious about our brother and sister communities around the world, and just ask like, oh, what's that dance? Just follow the things that pulls your spirit, because the curiosity is going to birth so many things. It's going to make you understand that, oh, cuckoo, so cuckoo flying fish from Barbados. The cuckoo comes from, Kenke. That's a Ghanaian thing. Boom. And just having those little curiosities, like, you know um and those things are just going to solidify and cement your identity. and help you to understand things. And then Kurt, that we're talking about in terms of healing. Okay, why is it that my uncle has this very bad relationship with rum? Why is it that we don't that there's such a high levels of depression in in Caribbean men, like, and it just, then the curiosity allows us to dissect certain things to add to our healing and to like solidify our identities, and those things are just going to birth and manifest so many other positive things, all the positive things that we want for our communities. And I think staying curious in terms of understanding ourselves are going to solve a lot of the things that we are struggling with and dealing with. And as you said, 3 centuries of undoing. And it's to stay curious every single day, ask the questions, and then it will just birth a lot of positive things in whatever different ways.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not gonna add to that because they've said it all.
Why?
Seriously. You said it
Yeah.
all. You said it all.
I think I can add something. For me, just doing this work, a lot of the time, it's also intimidating work because I'm not sure about anybody else on the panel, but I have a tendency, I think maybe it's a Caribbean thing, to struggle with imposter syndrome and, not thinking that I am competent enough to have these conversations and to guide anything or anyone in any way. But Fiona, Know Your Caribbean, for example, I am an avid reposter of Know Your Caribbean. And you said that started out of your own journey of self learning, and now it helps so many other people. Just do it. That's what I would say to, not to quote Nike, but um, do the work that needs to be done, whether you think you're doing it properly or not. Yeah, it's important work and it needs to be done. That's what I would say.
Mhm. Mhm.
And with that, folks, we have reached the end of our time. It
Mm.
has been beautiful sharing this space with you and hearing your perspectives on this topic. On behalf of the entire Black Consciousness Festival team, I would like to thank you for guiding such an enriching conversation. Anderson Gonçalves, Fiona Compton, Janelle Williams, and Kirt Henry, we thank you. To our partners, directors, and technical team, our sincere thanks. My fellow board members, Sean Samad, Eric MB Ashton, and Taika Pionero, the Department of Modern Languages and Linguistics at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, Lee Lodgman, Kieran McDowell, and everyone who made this year's festival possible, thank you. And finally, to you, our audience, thank you for tuning in and sharing this space with us. Remember,
Mhm.
tomorrow we invite you to join us for a screening of MOA, Mother Africa Roots, at the School of Education Auditorium at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine at 5 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. We would also like to extend our thanks to the Brazilian Embassy for facilitating the screening of this film. For more information about the festival, visit our website, theblackconsciousnessfestival.com. Have a good night, evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you are. And remember, breathe consciously, move, and walk in pride, power, and practice.